It is June 2021 and I am here again in Sandymount Green by the bust of W.B. Yeats, who was actually born in Sandymount in 1865. And unfortunately this year we're not able to do our usual residents association meeting about Yeats on the Green. Instead we're taking the first step to make a virtual video, and to kick it off I will read an extract from one of Yeats's poems, which is relevant at the moment because it commemorates the Anglo-Irish War which was going on at this time 100 years ago. Yeats called it 1919, and the verse of it goes, "Now days are dragon-ridden, the nightmare rides upon sleep. A drunken soldier he can leave the mother, murdered at her door, to crawl in her own blood and go scot-free. The night can sweat with terror as before. We pierced our thoughts into philosophy and planned to bring the world under a rule, who are but weasels fighting in a hole."
When You Are Old. This is Yeats's poem, and it's usually accepted that it is William addressing the great unrequited love of his life, Maud gone. He had wooed her with the passion of the strong, but she had spurned his proposals of marriage on 3 separate occasions. While many men loved her for her beauty and grace, William was the one who could have and would have loved her completely into her old age and decrepitude. And maybe when that day comes, he implies, she will regret that she turned him away. When you are old and grey and full of sleep and nodding by the fire, take down this book and slowly read, and dream of the soft look your eyes once had, and of their shadows deep. How many loved your moments of glad grace, and loved your beauty with love false or true. But one man loved the pilgrim soul in you, and loved the sorrows of your changing face. And bending down beside the glowing bars, murmur a little sadly how love fled and paced upon the mountains overhead and hid his face amid a crowd of stars.
Sally Gardens by W.B. Yeats. Down by the Sally Gardens my love and I did meet. She passed the Sally Gardens with little snow white feet. She bid me take love easy as the leaves grow on the tree. But I, being young and foolish, with her did not agree. In a field by the river my love and I did stand, and on my leaning shoulder she placed her snow white hand. She bid me take life easy as the grass grows on the weirs. But I was young and foolish, and now am full of tears. Broken dreams. There is grey in your hair. Young men no longer suddenly catch their breath when you are passing, but maybe some old gaffer mutters a blessing, because it was your prayer recovered him upon the bed of death. For your soul's sake, that all heart's-ache have known, and given to others all heart's-ache, for meagre girlhood's putting on burdensome beauty. For your soul's sake, heaven has put away the stroke of her doom, so great her portion in that peace you make by merely walking in a room. Your beauty can but leave among us vague memories, nothing but memories. A young man, when the old men are done talking, will say to an old man, "Tell us of that lady the poet, stubborn with his passion, sang us, when age might well have chilled his blood." Vague memories, nothing but memories. But in the grave, all shall be renewed. The certainty that I shall see that lady, leaning or standing or walking in the first loveliness of womanhood, and with the fervour of my youthful eyes, has set me muttering like a fool. You are more beautiful than anyone, and yet your body had a flaw. Your small hands were not beautiful, and I am afraid that you will run and paddle to the wrist in that mysterious, always brimming lake, where those that have obeyed the holy law paddle and are perfect. Leave unchanged the hands that I have kissed for old sake's sake. The last stroke of midnight dies. All day in the one chair, from dream to dream and rhyme to rhyme, I have ranged in rambling talk with an image of air. Vague memories, nothing but memories.
The Cat and the Moon. The cat went here and there, and the moon spun round like a top, and the nearest kin of the moon, the creeping cat, looked up. Black Minaloosh stared at the moon, for wander and wail as he would, the pure cold light in the sky troubled his animal blood. Minaloosh runs in the grass, lifting his delicate feet. Do you dance, Minaloosh? Do you dance? When two close kindred meet, what better than call a dance? Maybe the moon may learn, tired of that courtly fashion, a new dance turn. Minaloosh creeps through the grass, from moonlit place to place. The sacred moon overhead has taken a new phase. Does Minaloosh know that his pupils will pass from change to change, and that from round to crescent, from crescent to round, they range? Minaloosh creeps through the grass, alone, important and wise, and lifts to the changing moon his changing eyes.
Elan Lucha Innisfree. I roam ar Balbog agus Balliom Lum go Innisfree. Tóg me Bahan Bergaun as Queen is Gilcarí. Beg Nesra Ponry go maun, agus Crichog den Bach Mala, agus Cona me an Einer I Gumpord Machalla. Beg Shiachan agum san ihe, mar Chitin Shiachan go maul. Ik slaan o fer reelt na maidne, de naast in a Chan an Crichog. Tá me an ihe lande Londer, is man le in a heilshoe gal, agus van hon a lande choger Skihan na glortichan. I Romeinish, maar tloshim sheer Koreish gan a locha, an glad. Lef hoom bog isel de lo is die. Nur has me more. No an Kosan Fourli. Tloshim in Ninus Machri.
So I'm going to read The Second Coming by W.B. Yeats. Yeats wrote this poem in January 1919 at the height of the Spanish flu epidemic, and his wife George was seriously ill with flu but luckily recovered. The poem was then published in November 1920, and to commemorate this, the Yeats Society Sligo produced this booklet in November last year. I was given a present of it for Christmas by Noel Kavanagh, and I'd like to dedicate my reading to Noel. Now, the Yeats Society poet-in-residence, Jessica Traynor, has said of The Second Coming that it digs deep into the symbolism of our shared fears, reminds us that we have faced them before and that we've endured. So, The Second Coming. Turning and turning in the widening jar, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart, the centre cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. The blood-dim tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. Surely some revelation is at hand. Surely the second coming is at hand. The second coming. Hardly are those words out, when a vast image out of Spiritus Mundi troubles my sight. A wasted desert, a shape with a lion body and the head of a man. A gaze blank and pitiless as the sun is moving its slow thighs, while all about it wind shadows of indignant desert birds. The darkness drops again, and now I know that 30 centuries of stony sleep were vexed to nightmare by a rocking cradle. And what rough beast, its hour come round at last, slouches towards Bethlehem to be born? Thank you.
This year I'm going to read The Song of Wandering Aengus. This was published in Yeats' Wind Among the Reeds in 1899. Yeats' interest in Irish mythology shines through again in this poem, where he uses Aengus as the protagonist. Aengus was considered the god of love, youth and beauty. Aengus goes out to the woods to quench the fire burning in his head, presumably the fire of love and passion. He makes a wand from hazel wood, and the magic suddenly begins. The silver trout he has just caught and intends to cook turns into a beautiful girl who calls him by his name. Before disappearing through the flames of his campfire, he then spends his whole life trying to find her. The Song of Wandering Aengus by W.B. Yeats. I went out to the hazel wood because a fire was burning in my head, and cut and peeled a hazel wand, and hooked a berry to a thread. And when white moths were on the wing, and moth-like stars were flickering out, I dropped the berry in a stream and caught a little silver trout. When I had laid it on the floor, I went to blow the fire aflame, but something rustled on the floor, and someone called me by my name. It had become a glimmering girl with apple blossom in her hair, who called me by my name and ran and faded through the brightening air. Though I am old with wandering through hollow lands and hilly lands, I will find out where she has gone, and kiss her lips and take her hands, and walk among long dappled grass, and pluck till time and times are done, the silver apples of the moon, the golden apples of the sun.
The old priest Peter Gilligan was weary night and day, for half his flock were in their beds or under green sods lay. Once while he nodded on his chair at the moth hour of eve, another poor man sent for him, and he began to grieve. I have no rest, nor joy, nor peace, for people die and die. And then cried he, God forgive, my body spake, not I. He knelt and leaning on a chair, he prayed and fell asleep, and the moth hour went from the fields, and stars began to peep. They slowly into millions grew, and leaves shook in the wind, and God covered the world with shade and whispered to mankind. Upon the time of sparrow chirp, when the moths came once more, the old priest Peter Gilligan stood upright on the floor. Morone, Morone, the man has died, while I slept on the chair. He roused his horse out of its sleep and rode with little care. He rode now as he had never rode, by rocky lane and fen. The sick man's wife answered the door, "Father, you come again." "And is the poor man dead?" he cried. "He died an hour ago." The old priest Peter Gilligan in grief swayed to and fro. "When you were gone he turned and died as merry as a bird." The old priest Peter Gilligan, he knelt him at the word. He who had made tire and bleed sent one of his great angels to help me in my need. He who was wrapped in purple with planets in his care took pity on the least of things, asleep upon a chair.
The Stairs Nest by My Window by William Butler Yeats. The bees build in the crevices of loosening masonry, and there the mother birds bring grubs and flies. My wall is loosening. Honey bees, come build in the empty house of the stair. We are closed in, and the key is turned on our uncertainty. Somewhere a man is killed, or a house burned, yet no clear fact to be discerned. Come build in the empty house of the stair. A barricade of stone or of wood, some 14 days of civil war. Last night they trundled down the road, that dead young soldier in his blood. Come build in the empty house of the stair. We had fed the heart on fantasies, the heart's grown brutal from the fair. More substance in our enmities than in our love. Oh, honey bees, come build in the empty house of the stair. Thank you.
Easter 1916. I have met them at close of day, coming with vivid faces from counter or desk among grey 18th century houses. I have passed with a nod of the head or polite meaningless words, or have lingered a while and said polite meaningless words, and thought before I had gone of a mocking tale or a jibe to please a companion round the fire at the club, being certain that they and I but lived where motley was worn, all changed, changed utterly, a terrible beauty is born. That woman's days were spent in ignorant goodwill, her nights in argument until her voice grew shrill. What voice more sweet than hers, when young and beautiful she rode to harriers? This man had kept a school and rode our winged horse. This other, his helper and friend, was coming into his force. He might have won fame in the end, so sensitive his nature seemed, so daring and sweet his thought. This other man I had named a drunken, vainglorious lout. He had done most bitter wrong to some who are near my heart, yet I number him in my song. He too has resigned his part in this casual comedy. He too has been changed, changed utterly. A terrible beauty is born. Hearts with one purpose alone, through summer and winter seem enchanted to a stone to trouble the living stream. The horse that comes from the road, the rider, the birds that wheel from cloud to tumbling cloud, minute by minute they change. A shadow of cloud in the stream changes minute by minute. A horse hoof slaps on the rim, and the horse plashes within it. The long-legged moorhens dive, and hens to moorcocks call. Minute by minute they live, the stones in the midst of all. Too long a sacrifice can make a stone of the heart. Oh, when may it suffice? That is heaven's part, our part to murmur name upon name, as a mother names her child when sleep at last has come on limbs that had run wild. What is it but nightfall? No, no, not night, but death. And was it needless death after all? For England may keep faith for all that is done and said. We know their dream, enough to know they dream it and are dead. And what if excess of love bewildered them till they died? I write it out in a verse, MacDonagh and MacBride, and Connolly and Pearse, now and in time to be, wherever green is worn, are changed utterly. A terrible beauty is born.
Red Hanrahan's song about Ireland. The old brown thorn tree breaks in two, high over common strand, under a bitter black wind that blows from the left hand. Our courage breaks like an old tree in a black wind that dies. But we have hidden in our hearts the flame out of the eyes of Kathleen, the daughter of Houlihan. The wind has bundled up the clouds high over Knocknobay, and thrown the thunder on the stones for all that Maeve can say. Angers that are like noisy clouds have set our hearts a beat, but we have all bent low, and kissed the quiet feet of Kathleen, the daughter of Houlihan. The yellow pool has overflowed high up on Cloonabear, for the wet winds are blowing out of the clinging air. Like heavy flooded waters our bodies and our blood, but purer than the tall candle before the holy rood is Kathleen, the daughter of Houlihan.
George Orwell on W.B. Yeats. The subject matter and imagery of a book can be explained in sociological terms, but its texture seemingly cannot. One knows, for instance, that a socialist would not write like Chesterton, or a Tory imperialist like Bernard Shaw, though how one knows is not easy to say. In the case of Yeats, there must be some kind of connection between his wayward, even tortured style of writing and his rather sinister vision of life. Mr. Menon is chiefly concerned with esoteric philosophy underlying Yeats's work, but the quotations which are scattered all through his interesting book serve to remind one how artificial Yeats's manner of writing was. As a rule, this artificiality is accepted as an Irish-ism, or Yeats is even credited with simplicity because he uses short words, but in fact one seldom comes on 6 consecutive lines of his verse in which there is not an anarchism or affected turn of speech. The unnecessary, that imports a feeling of affection and some tendency, is present on all but Yeats's best passages. Yeats is an exception to the rule that poets do not use poetical language. The A Vision, a privately printed book which I have never read but which Mr. Menon quotes from extensively, Yeats gives conflicting accounts of its origin, and Mr. Menon hints pretty broadly that the documents on which it was ostensibly founded were imaginary. Translated into political terms, Yeats's tendency is fascist. Though most of his life, and long before fascism was ever heard of, he had the outlook of those who reach fascism by aristocratic route. He is a great hater of democracy, of the modern world, science, machinery, the concept of progress, above all, of the idea of human equality. Much of the imagery of his work is feudal. and it is clear that he was not altogether free from ordinary snobbishness. How do Yeats's political ideas link up with his learning towards occultism? It is not clear at first glance what hatred of democracy and a tendency to believe in crystal gazing should go together. Yeats is by no means alone in this outlook. No doubt Yeats wavered in his beliefs and held at different times many different opinions, some enlightened, some not. Mr. Menon repeats for him Eliot's claim that he had the longest period of development of any poet who has ever lived. Beautiful words, by implication profoundly obscurantist and reactionary, for it is really true that a village idiot as such is wiser than a philosopher. Then it would be better if the alphabet had never been invented. Of course, all praise of the past is partly sentimental because we do not live in the past. The relationship between fascism and the literary intelligentsia badly needs investigating, and Yeats might well be the starting point. He is best studied by someone like Mr. Menon, who can approach a poet primarily as a poet, but who knows that a writer's political and religious beliefs are not extrinsics to be laughed away, but something that will leave their mark even on the smallest detail of his work. Thank you.
A drinking song. Wine comes in at the mouth, and love comes in at the eye. That's all we shall know for truth before we grow old and die. I lift the glass to my mouth, I look at you and I sigh.
When You Are Old is a bittersweet poem that reveals the complexities of love. It is generally taken to be addressed to Maud Gonne, whom, as we know, Yeats was infatuated with throughout his life. Published in 1893, Yeats asked her to think ahead to old age, strongly suggesting that she would eventually regret being unwilling to return his love. When You Are Old has been set to the beautiful music of Mr. Paul Allen.
welcome to the virtual programme to mark the celebration of Yeats's birthday in 1865 at Sandymount Green. First to read was Tony Jordan from 1919. Rodney Devitt read When You Were Old and Grey. Linus Casson sang The Sally Gardens. Joe Lynch recited Broken Dreams. Alison Gavin recited The Cat and the Moon. Maurice Curran read Ilan Raha Inish Free. Margaret Pickup read The Second Coming. Miriam McAvoy, Song of Wandering Angus. Charles Lycett, The Old Priest Peter Gilligan. Joe Lynch recited Easter 1916. Claire McVanney read The Stairs Nest by My Window. Linus Casson read Hanrahan's Song. Patrick Hugh Lynch read George Orwell and W.B. Yeats. Louise Burke read, or sang rather, When You Were Old and Grey, and a surprise guest appearance by Lily Morden, who recited A Drinking Song. Last of all, I would like to thank Maurice Curran, who recorded the various items around Sandymount over the past 2 weeks. Now that completes the video for this year, and all we can do is look forward to 2022 and hope that we are free to return to the Green as per usual by the Residents Association. Thank you very much.